Hey, want a cookie? Oh, I know you just ate, so you're craving something a little sweet. Besides, one cookie isn't gonna kill you. How about half? Just a bite? Bite it. Bite it. Bite it.
Food noise isn't fair, but Mochi Health is. Your affordable GLP-1 source that puts you on a path to successful weight loss by quieting food noise.
Bite it.
Shh. Learn more at joinmochi.com. Mochi members have access to licensed physicians and nutritionists. Results may vary.
This episode of Voices for Justice is sponsored by Shopify. Starting a business is filled with a lot of what-ifs. What if I fail? What if nobody listens to the podcast? What if nobody cares? It can definitely be hard to get over that doubt and uncertainty, but making that leap was one of the best things I've ever done, and it's great to know that I'm not alone with a business partner like Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world, and 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from household names like Heinz and Mattel to brands just getting started. And I'm telling you, their tools really do feel like you have a business partner. They have hundreds of ready-to-use templates to help build a beautiful online store that matches your brand. You can also get the word out like you have an entire marketing team behind you. Easily create email and social media campaigns wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. And if you get stuck, Shopify is always there to help with their award-winning 24/7 customer service. It's time to turn those what-ifs into with Shopify today. Sign up for your $1 per month trial today at shopify.com/justice. Go to shopify.com/justice. That's shopify.com/justice. Voices for Justice is a podcast that uses adult language and discusses sensitive and potentially triggering topics, including violence, abuse, and murder. This podcast may not be appropriate for younger audiences. All parties are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Some names have been changed or omitted per their request or for safety purposes. Listener discretion is advised. My name is Sarah Turney, and this is Voices for Justice. Today, I'm discussing the case of Mae and Anne Rubenstein. It was an ordinary Saturday in Highland Park, New Jersey in 1965. On South 3rd Avenue, the Rubenstein home wouldn't have looked unusual to anyone passing by. A family lived there, a mother, a daughter, a husband, a son. But for a little while that afternoon, it was just 11-year-old Mae at home. Her father and older brother were at work. Her mother Anne was out grocery shopping. It was the kind of normal family rhythm that doesn't stand out at all. Until something happens that makes every small detail feel important later. And that's part of what makes this case so haunting, because nothing about the setup sounds remarkable. A mom running errands, a child at home, a quiet neighborhood in a small New Jersey borough, a winter Saturday, the day before Valentine's Day. It should have been forgettable. Instead, something happened inside that house that would leave a family shattered, and a mystery that still hasn't been resolved over 60 years later. This is the case of Mae and Anne Rubenstein. It's Saturday, February 13th, 1965 in Highland Park, New Jersey, and 11-year-old Mae Rubenstein is home alone. Kind of. She and her family live in a 2-story home that's been converted into a multifamily residence. So her family lives on the ground floor and another family lives on the second floor with their own separate entrance. The tenants upstairs are home, but Mae's alone in her family's apartment. Her father, 42-year-old Robert, and her older brother, 16-year-old Elihu, left for work at about 8 a.m. They work together at the family business, Star Lumber Co., about 7 miles away in Piscataway, New Jersey. Mae's mother, Anne, is 41, and that morning she left to do some grocery shopping. So by about mid-morning, it's just Mae at home while her mom's grabbing food for the family. Mae's in the 6th grade at Lafayette School and is looking forward to attending a birthday party that night. So naturally, she takes advantage of being home alone to hog the phone and talk to a friend. Maybe they discuss school or going to the party later. Unfortunately, the reporting around this isn't very detailed. We just know that at about 12:30 p.m., Mae's on the phone with a friend when she tells them, quote, "I have to go now. I think my mother's coming in," end quote. Then the call ends. Now, Anne's nephew, 9-year-old Maurice Feller, lives nearby. Reporting does vary a bit, but most sources say he lived about a block away. At about 2:30 p.m., he stops by for a drink of water. This was pretty normal for him. But what happened next was anything but. Maurice let himself into the house as he usually did. The door was unlocked. And as he opens it, right there in the foyer of the home was his Aunt Anne lying in a pool of blood. It's obviously just a very horrific scene, and Maurice is only 9, so he immediately runs out of the house and upstairs to ask for help. According to reporting by the Central New Jersey Home News, he tells one of the upstairs neighbors, 20-year-old Diane O'Connor, quote, "Something has happened to my aunt. She's bleeding. I think she fell down," end quote. When Diane goes downstairs to see what's going on, she too sees Anne in the foyer. But she also sees something Maurice didn't. 11-year-old Mae was just 15 feet away, lying face down in another pool of blood in the kitchen. Diane immediately calls the Highland Park Police, and not long after, the Middlesex County Medical Examiner pronounces both Anne and Mae deceased at the scene. According to reporting by the Star-Ledger, Robert and his son were called home from work. As Robert walked into their home, he was told what happened to his wife and daughter, and collapsed from shock. He and his son were taken to a friend's house, and in a move that's been described as an act of catastrophic, misguided compassion, officers, friends, and family clean up the scene. This episode of Voices for Justice is sponsored by Chewy. If you have pets, you probably know about Chewy, and you also know that when they say that they have everything you need to keep your pet happy and healthy, they're not messing around. To keep them happy, Chewy has over 100,000 products from all the brands my pets love at prices I love. To keep them healthy, Chewy offers pet prescriptions, pet insurance, telehealth vet visits, and they're even rolling out vet clinics across the country. I've been shopping with them for a very long time. And in addition to the auto-ship feature that gets the dog's food to them every single month, I also love to experiment with different treats. But I'm a bit picky. For me, it has to be high quality with simple ingredients. I recently picked up treats from Shepherd Boy Farms that are 100% just chicken breast. Popcorn and Heber are already obsessed. Chewy has everything you need to keep your pet happy and healthy. And right now, you can save $20 on your first order and get free shipping by going to chewpanions.chewy.com/Sarah E. Turney. That's chewpanions.chewy.com/Sarah E. Turney to save $20 on your first order with free shipping. chewpanions.chewy.com/Sarah E. Turney. Minimum purchase required. New customers only. Terms and conditions apply. See site for complete details. This episode of Voices for Justice is brought to you by Quince. I've been trying to be more intentional about what I wear each day. I'm leaning into pieces that feel effortless, comfortable, and still put together. And Quince has been my go-to. The fabrics feel elevated, the fits are flattering, and everything just works without overthinking it. They use premium materials like 100% European linen, organic cotton, and ultra-soft denim. And the best part? Everything is priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. They work directly with ethical factories and cut out the middlemen, so you're paying for quality and craftsmanship, not brand markup. I recently just ordered their tiered linen dress, of course in black. I wanted to pair it with one of my favorite pairs of brown wedges. The problem was, I didn't have a brown purse. So I got that from Quince too. It's one of my favorite outfits. It's easy, effortless, and feels amazing, especially as we're getting a little bit warmer here in Phoenix. Refresh your everyday with luxury you'll actually use. Head to quince.com/justice for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/justice for free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/justice. When Middlesex County Chief Examiner Dr. William C. Willens arrived at the Rubenstein crime scene on February 13, 1965, the violence was so extreme that he was quoted as saying that the killer must have been a sadist. So let's break down the scene. I'm looking at a floor plan of their apartment published by the Central New Jersey Home News. It's up on the Voices for Justice website and social media pages if you want to take a look for yourself. As you walk into the house, you enter the foyer. To the left, there are 2 bedrooms, and directly in front of you is the bathroom. Anne was found between the back bedroom and the bathroom. She was still wearing her heavy winter coat and was surrounded by the groceries she just bought, now scattered on the floor. There were also visible scuff marks on the floor near Anne's body, leading investigators to believe that she likely fought back against her killer. Now, looking at this diagram, it makes sense to me why Maurice didn't immediately see Mae's body. To the right of the foyer is a 3rd bedroom and the kitchen, and this is not an open floor plan. While the diagram doesn't explicitly show us which rooms have doors, it's clear that the opening to the kitchen from the foyer is small, about the size of a door. Mae was found in the corner of the kitchen, immediately to the left as you walk in. So depending on where Maurice was in the foyer, it's possible he couldn't have seen her from the right angle. And if there was a door there, there's just no way he would have seen her. The kitchen acts as the passage to the living room and to the home's second outside entrance through the porch, which leads to 3rd Avenue. We obviously have no idea which way the killer went, but there are 2 ways in and out of the home. Now let's break down the autopsies. You guys know me, I'm going to try my best to minimize the gore of it all. But there's really no way to tell you about how each of them died without mentioning the brutal way in which they were killed. Anne was stabbed 30 to 35 times in the stomach, chest, heart, and lung. Mae was stabbed 15 to 20 times. Her jugular vein was slashed, and she had wounds to her head, throat, and chest. Neither were sexually assaulted. The cause of death for both was listed as hemorrhaging due to their wounds. Now, investigators searched the house, nearby bushes, and trash cans, but unfortunately, the murder weapon was never found at the scene. But the ME concluded that the likely weapon was a long blade kitchen knife, as well as possibly a fork. Despite never finding the murder weapon and not even being sure exactly what was used, they did take a variety of utensils from the kitchen, including a knife and a fork, for testing. Almost immediately, investigators were left with one of the biggest questions in this case. Why would someone do something like this? There were no signs of forced entry, and it doesn't appear that anything was taken from the home. In fact, over $100 in cash was left in plain sight on a dresser in one of the bedrooms. Adjusted for inflation, that's about $1,000 today. So while a robbery gone wrong was considered as a likely motive for some time, it was eventually ruled out. Here's what investigators theorize happened. Mae was on the phone with her friend when she heard the killer coming into her home, not her mom. We don't know if the door was locked when Anne left the house, so another big question is whether or not this person had a key or if the door was unlocked. The phone was found hung on the receiver, so between this and speaking with Mae's friend, it appears that she did complete her call. Someone comes in the front door, Mae thinks it's her mother, but instead it's the killer. After Mae was killed, the perpetrator stayed in the home for some reason. What time Anne came home is unclear. Investigators have never given us a definitive timeline. Most reporting says sometime between 12:30 when Mae hung up the phone and about 2:30 when Maurice found them. Now you're probably thinking what I was at this point, but what about the upstairs neighbors? Well, they told police that they didn't hear or see anything suspicious. We do have 2 possible witnesses, though. 15-year-old Beth Maroney lived across the street. At about 3 p.m., she and a friend were walking back to her home following an afternoon of shopping in New Brunswick. As they're about to turn into the walkway to her house, they see a man rush past them. Beth described him as white, tall, about 50 years old, with ice blue eyes. He was wearing a long coat and a fedora pulled low over his eyes. In an article Beth wrote for tapinto.net, she explains that she got a chill when the man walked past them, and when she asked her friend if she noticed him as well, she pulled up her sleeve to show the goosebumps she'd gotten from him. Beth would later describe the vibe she got from this man as evil. Within the hour, she found out that Mae and Anne had both been killed. Realizing that they may have seen the man who did this, Beth and her friend go to the police to provide a description. Police are also able to speak with other neighbors who they say provided an accurate description of a suspicious man seen loitering in the area between 11 a.m. and 5 p.m. Those descriptions have not been provided to the public, though. So as far as witnesses at the scene that day, we don't have many. By 6 p.m., Anne and Mae are removed from the home by the Jackie Funeral Home as neighbors and friends gathered around. Like I told you earlier, the police, along with friends and family, cleaned up the scene that night. It really was a kind gesture that not all families are given with the intention of sparing Robert from having to do it himself, but it did destroy any potential DNA evidence. A joint funeral was held for Anne and Mae the following day, Valentine's Day. Hundreds of people attended the 20-minute service. The funeral procession consisted of 2 hearses, the family car, and about 35 additional cars traveling to Mount Lebanon Cemetery. This family was well known in their community and was described as a good, wholesome family. They were very loved. Once the crime scene was cleaned up and the funeral was over, the investigation really began that Monday, February 15th. The first thing Highland Park Police Chief Alfred T. Smalley did was add an additional 15 police reserves to the 22-member force to patrol the neighborhood on foot. Those reserve officers worked up to 20 hours a day without pay. They went door-to-door conducting searches, and specifically looking for, quote, disturbed men or individuals with fresh scratches on their faces. Officers also patrolled the area in their squad cars to increase police presence and to quell the fears of local residents. Some patrolled the area in their private vehicles as well to watch more covertly. A special tip line was also established at the police headquarters. By the end of the week, police and community members pieced together a reward of $8,000. Adjusted for inflation, that's about $83,000 today. So it was sizable, larger than most rewards we see even today. On Friday the 19th, 2 detectives flew to Chicago to investigate what County Prosecutor Edward J. Dolan described as a good lead. In his interview with Arnold Markowitz for the Star-Ledger, he wouldn't give many details beyond that, though. Despite these efforts, however, the detectives returned empty-handed the following day after verifying the potential suspect's alibi and clearing them completely in this case. The 3-day weekend for George Washington's birthday was canceled for detectives working at the prosecutor's office. They were instead ordered to work around the clock on the Rubenstein case. By April, detectives had questioned more than 500 people, or about 4% of the population of Highland Park at the time. They also scoured through photos and records of known criminals who had committed similar crimes. About 6 weeks in, they didn't have much. They didn't know who did this or why. They consulted with leading psychiatrists to get a better understanding of the type of person they should be looking for. They were told that whoever did this was likely a psychopath. But that's really all they had. 15-year-old Beth Maroney said that police really just wrote her and her friend's statements off. She says she doesn't think that they ever took them seriously. A sketch of the man she saw was never created. The timeline was never changed to reflect their statements, and this potential lead really just sat. Meanwhile, Beth was riddled with fear. She had nightmares of testifying against the man that were so intense she would wake up screaming at times. And she wasn't alone in being afraid. There are about half a dozen articles outlining the fear of local residents following the murders. They outlined stories of women carrying hat pins and police whistles for protection, of wives asking their husbands to call before leaving work to ensure that they knew who was coming through the front door. An anonymous resident told the Central New Jersey Home News, quote, "My wife used to open the door without looking to see if it was me. She quit doing that. Now she locks the storm door, the front door, and she peeks out from behind the curtain before she goes near the door." End quote. A manager at a local animal shelter said that while they normally adopt out their small dogs first, they'd adopted over 30 large dogs to local residents and had a waiting list for more. Local hardware stores were running out of chain locks and other secondary door locks. This city of 12,000 people was mostly terrified, and the Highland Park Police didn't have any answers for them. In July, there was a lot of noise around a 17-year-old boy police questioned, though. He hasn't been named in the media, but police say that he knew Mae and Anne and had been in their home previously. He's described as a probation violator and an awful liar. He was arrested the previous October after using a rifle to fire across the Raritan River at a hotel and a county administration building. By July, he was out on probation, and officers wanted to ask him about this case. There was just one little problem. His family had moved shortly after he was released and never provided a forwarding address to the court, so they didn't know where he was at. That is, until the end of July, when investigator Charles Amick was driving north on Route 1 and recognized the driver of a vehicle headed in the opposite direction. It was the 17-year-old boy's mother. So he calls it in to the Highland Park Police, and eventually Lieutenant William Cuddy finds and follows the vehicle to a nearby drive-in theater. But when the boy sees the officer, he jumped out of the car and ran into the nearby woods. He completely escapes Lieutenant Cuddy that night. But the following morning, police in Newark found him near his home. So he was finally questioned, but ultimately never considered a prime suspect in this case. And outside of a few articles outlining what I just told you, it doesn't seem that anything ever came of this. Or like I always say, if it did, investigators didn't tell the media about it. So the case went quiet again until the end of October, when a man in Albany, New York, walked up to two police officers and said he'd killed a mother and daughter in Highland Park.
Insurance isn't one size fits all. That's why customers have enjoyed Progressive's Name Your Price tool for years now. With the Name Your Price tool, you tell them what you want to pay, and they'll show you options that fit your budget. So whether you're picking out your first policy or just looking for something that works better for you and your family, they make it easy to see your options. Visit Progressive.com. Find a rate that works for you with the Name Your Price tool. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
At DSW, we ask the important questions, like, what shoes are you going to wear? Whether you're prepping for wedding season, festival season, or just planning the ultimate vacay, the right shoes can make or break an RSVP. So own the moment. You've got big plans, and we've got just the shoes. At the perfect price, of course. Get ready to get ready with Designer Shoe Warehouse. Head to your DSW store or DSW.com today and let us surprise you.
8 months after the murders, there were few viable leads in the case. Investigators still had no idea who killed Anne and Mae or why. Hundreds of people were questioned, but none were arrested for the crime. Then, at the end of October, about 200 miles away in Albany, New York, a 56-year-old man named John Myers walked up to two police officers and surrendered, saying he killed a mother and daughter in Highland Park. According to reporting by the Central New Jersey Home News, despite the man claiming to live in North Brunswick, New Jersey, he was promptly arrested on a vagrancy charge and sentenced to 30 days in jail. So police had plenty of time to talk with him. It appears that he did live about 5 miles away from Highland Park, but that seems to be the best possible connection they could find to the Rubenstein murders. Because when investigators asked Myers to describe how he killed Mae and Anne, he said he'd strangled them, which we know isn't how they died. They were stabbed, and the autopsy doesn't make any mention of possible strangulation. He also described their home as being white and blue despite it being yellow. Now, he did say that when he saw Anne, she was carrying a bag of groceries, but since that detail was widely reported on, investigators don't consider this to be proof of his claim. They also learned that Myers had a pretty lengthy history of struggling with alcoholism, and that he'd been employed as a mechanic in a bowling alley in the Albany area. So where he was actually residing became increasingly unclear. During the interview, Myers apparently became violently ill and was taken to the hospital where medical professionals believed he was suffering from a heart attack. His condition did improve and he was returned to the jail, but in the end, investigators had little faith that he was telling the truth about killing Mae and Anne. And while his claims were looked into, he was never arrested and ultimately not considered to be a prime suspect. I mean, they had nothing in this case, but they were trying. Around the same time, investigators met with Bergen County Prosecutor Guy W. Calisi to discuss a possible connection between the Rubenstein murders and the recent killing of 18-year-old Alice Eberhardt about 40 miles away in Fair Lawn, New Jersey. Alice was a student nurse at Hackensack Hospital, and on September 24, 1965, she stopped by home after work to get ready to attend her aunt's funeral when she was brutally attacked. She was stabbed 60 times and suffered a double skull fracture from a blunt instrument. She was not sexually assaulted and nothing was missing from the home. It was actually her dad who found her in the living room of their home when he came to pick her up for the funeral. So we have two very tragic cases with no apparent motive. Both crimes happened in the afternoon. There was no sign of forced entry at either scene, with both killers essentially disappearing into the residential neighborhood shortly after. The cases seem so similar, but it appears that whatever came from this meeting didn't lead either agency to officially link the cases to the same person. It was another dead end. By the 1-year anniversary, investigators had about as much as they did on day one, and Robert Rubenstein gave a very candid interview to Alvin King for the Central New Jersey Home News. He said, quote, "My one desire to find and eliminate this animal has given way to resignation that life must go on." End quote. He added that his son was the reason why, and his saving grace. But of course, he was not satisfied with the lack of answers. He said the grief of the murders belonged to his family, but the crime was against the community and society as a whole. He didn't have any theories about the murder, but said he believed investigators had done all they could within the framework they had to work with. His biggest lingering question was why? Why did it happen to his family? When asked if he was confident that the killer would be caught, he said no. He wasn't confident, but he was hopeful. He added, quote, "This crime is too important not to be resolved." End quote. Investigators were questioned for the article as well, and County Prosecutor Edward J. Dolan expressed his frustration over the case. He said that while they occasionally get a lead, everything they've looked into so far was a dead end. That article came out in 1966. And we really don't have any type of update in the case until 40 years later when Elihu Rubenstein spoke with Lonnie Mack for the Central New Jersey Home News in 2006. By this time, he was living in East Brunswick and was a retired college administrator. He said at this point he had his doubts that anyone was even looking into the case anymore, but he was pushing for retesting evidence. He said he wasn't looking for any type of vengeance, only justice. Though he did acknowledge that the killer or killers might have already passed by this time. Like his father 40 years ago, he also had no theory on why someone would do this. But he did allude to talk that they might have been targeted by mistake, and that it was another family who was to be killed. Overall, he was frustrated with investigators, saying, quote, "What does it take to light a fire under these people to do their job?" End quote. Assistant Prosecutor Nicholas C. Witch was also interviewed for the article. He said the case was currently being reviewed and that he was pleased with the progress. He added that they believed the killer made several mistakes that could prove helpful in solving the crime, and he expressed hope that advances in forensic science would help them find the killer. Quote, "We now have tools and resources at our disposal that did not exist in 1965. We are using these tools and resources in an effort to bring the murderer to justice." End quote. However, he declined to state which evidence they had. Which makes sense to me, because we know that they mopped up the blood just hours after Mae and Anne were killed. And in the most recent reporting on this case, it was revealed that they had nothing to test. If there were any results from testing the random kitchen utensils taken from the scene that night, they were never made public. And as far as I can tell, the items were never retained in evidence. Neither were Mae or Anne's clothing, the grocery bag, nothing. It would take about another 10 years for all of that to come out when the case made headlines again after Elizabeth, New Jersey police captain Todd Mooney created a Facebook group to help solve one of his oldest cold cases, the murder of 7-year-old Wendy Wolin in 1966. I told you about Wendy's case last week, but as a very brief refresher, she was on the street in broad daylight when a man stabbed her in the stomach and killed her. Her case, like Anne and Mae's, remains unsolved. So in Mooney's quest to solve Wendy's case, he looked at the Rubenstein murders, and specifically at a lead that he felt was underinvestigated. Statements from 2 teenage girls who say they saw a man outside of the Rubenstein home shortly after the murders. They were never re-interviewed, and a sketch was never made of the man. So Mooney found Beth Maroney and asked her to join the Facebook group, and specifically to review the sketch of Wendy's killer. Beth later recounted what happened next in an article she wrote for tapinto.net, saying, quote, "As soon as I saw the image on Facebook, I started to scream. There he was. Icy eyes, fedora perched on his head, long trench coat. There was no doubt in my mind, even 50 years later. The man's face was etched into my brain forever." End quote.
What they did to your family, you're lucky to make it out alive.
Streaming on Peacock.
These men are going to come after me. Taking them out is my only chance.
Put a bullet in her head.
From the co-creator of Ozark.
Looks like a family was running drugs.
Execution-style killing, it's rare for the keys. And it leads on who they might have been running for.
The cartel killed my family. I'm gonna kill them. All of them.
MIA. Streaming now. Only on Peacock.
Beth Maroney was 15 years old and lived right across the street when the Rubenstein double murders happened in 1965. Nearly half a century later, an investigator looking into the unsolved murder of another stabbing victim, 7-year-old Wendy Wolin in 1966, asks her to look at a sketch of the man who killed Wendy. And Beth says that is the man she saw on the day that Anne and Mae were killed. Now, as you can imagine, this really takes off in the Facebook group as people read Beth's comments about a possible connection. And this leads to more media coverage and more interviews that reinvigorate the theory brought up by Elihu Rubenstein a decade prior, that maybe this was a case of mistaken identity. Let me explain. It's a bit of a tangled web I'm about to weave, but it's important. Another person who was in this Facebook group was Jody Wolin, Wendy Wolin's older sister. She said that she'd never even heard of the Rubenstein murders until she joined this Facebook group. But as she learns more about it, she begins posting some comments. And she says that her late grandfather owed money to the mob. Now, if you remember my episode about Wendy Wolin, they lived with their grandparents in Highland Park when the Rubensteins were murdered. And just 11 days later, they moved to Elizabeth. But what we find out now in 2016 is that Jody was never given a reason for why they moved so abruptly. And you guys, guess what her grandparents' last name was? Rubenstein. Jody said that when she connected all these dots, she was appalled at the coincidences. And Elihu Rubenstein chimed in too, saying outright that he can't believe this is just one big coincidence. He said that there are too many similarities in the cases, and added that the killer could have been looking for him or Wendy in his home. But, like I told you last week in Wendy's episode, investigators say they were never able to make a formal connection between the cases, and it appears that this theory wasn't really taken seriously by investigators. That's basically where Anne and Mae's case is today. There's never been a formal suspect. Not the upstairs neighbors, not the 17-year-old acquaintance, and never the man who confessed. As far as we know, there's no evidence left to be tested at this point. But there has been one very recent development that gives me hope in this case. In January 2026, investigators announced that they'd solved the murder of Alice Eberhardt, the 18-year-old student nurse killed a few months after the Rubensteins. And it looks like it was largely solved due to just a single concerned citizen. In 2021, the Fair Lawn Police Department got a call from one of Alice's classmates who had not been named in the media. They asked them to take another look at the case, and they did. They reopened it that spring. Then a man who was never on their radar began making headlines. Richard Cottingham was serving 3 life sentences for several homicides, including the 1974 murders of Mary Ann Pryor and Lorraine Marie Kelly. In 2022, he pleaded guilty in Nassau County to the 1968 murder of Diane Cussick, where he was given another 25 years to life. So the Fair Lawn Police Department looked into Cottingham and realized he lived in the area when Alice Eberhardt was murdered. They are very intrigued at this point, so they pay him a visit in prison, and after 5 hours, Cottingham says he killed at least 80 people and confessed to killing an additional 6 women in Long Island. On their second visit, they brought up Alice. When discussing her murder, Cottingham was quick to correct the investigators' error about how the killer entered the home. And finally, after more than 5 visits to Cottingham, he confessed to killing Alice on December 22, 2025. Over 60 years later, they solved the case. As a part of his deal, he wasn't given any additional time for Alice's murder, but her family was relieved nonetheless. Her nephew, Michael Smith, wrote in a statement, quote, "Our family has waited since 1965 for the truth. To be able to tell my mother, Alice's sister, that we finally have answers was a moment I never thought would come." End quote. Which brings me right to our call to action. That's the part I want to leave you with today. Hope. We don't know if Alice's case has any connections at all to the murders, and it would be irresponsible of me to pretend otherwise. But what Alice's case does prove is that time doesn't always erase the truth. Even after decades of silence, even after leads go cold and memories fade, answers can still come. A case that once seemed lost forever can suddenly move again because one person asks police to take another look, because one investigator keeps digging, because one detail finally falls into place. So please share this case. If you've listened to Anne and Mae's story and felt that familiar heartbreak of an unsolved case, I really hope you'll hold on to this. Unresolved does not always mean unsolvable, and sometimes, after years of waiting, justice finds its way back. As Robert said back in 1966, this crime is too important not to be resolved. So please share. As a reminder, on February 13, 1965, 41-year-old Anne Rubenstein and her 11-year-old daughter Mae were found fatally stabbed in their home at 437 South 3rd Avenue in Highland Park, New Jersey. A man seen near the home shortly after the murders has been described as white, tall, about 50 years old, with ice blue eyes. He was wearing a long coat and a fedora pulled low over his eyes. Anyone with information is asked to call the Highland Park Police Department at 732-572-3800. But as always, thank you, I love you, and I'll talk to you next time. Voices for Justice is hosted and produced by me, Sarah Turney, and is a Voices for Justice media original. If you love what we do here, please don't forget to follow, rate, and review the show in your podcast player. It's an easy and free way to help us and help more people find these cases in need of justice. Welcome to the Secret After Show. The studio door is open, and our emotional support puppies, Popcorn and Heber, are in the room. Let's go right into the case. I couldn't leave this case after hearing about it when I was researching the murder of Wendy Wolin. I just couldn't. This isn't something I've done before, but I really thought that this format made sense. I really liked following this trail from Wendy Wolin to the Rubensteins. Again, I think I have so much guilt in the cases that I don't cover and that I can't get to that I really like to be able to include them in this second episode, if you will. It kind of feels like a continuation of Wendy Wolin. But you guys tell me, what did you think? I mean, obviously, I'm going to cover a case if I think it needs coverage, but I'm always looking for constructive criticism and feedback to make this show the best it can be. The next thing I have on my list is just that my heart breaks for Maurice. To have to see your family like that at 9 is just unimaginable. And I don't just say these things in the after show to pull at your heartstrings, right? It's also so that we understand the secondary victims and really the ripple effect that true crime has. So many people were really just left in the wake of these murders. But there were some sad things too that I have on my list. It's just sad, and there's no getting around it. You guys, the day of the service being on Valentine's Day, right after you lose your wife and your daughter, you lose your sister. It's just so unfair. And again, it brings me back to Wendy Wolin, right? And her parents having the service on their anniversary. I just don't know what the cruel and unusual timing is in these two cases, but I just could not overlook it. And that even goes into Alice's case, right? And her father finding her when he was picking her up for a funeral. I just couldn't overlook those things. It's just that pain on top of pain that I want to recognize and kind of honor here, because it just adds a layer to this being impossible. I also wanted to say here that, of course, I published Wendy Wolin's case around the time of her anniversary, and I was really hoping that for the 60-year anniversary, there would be another pop of media coverage. We see that all the time, right? Especially with these bigger numbers like 60. And you guys, I didn't see anything. I didn't see anything. And I will say, the numbers for her case are down too, and it breaks my heart. It seems like as time goes by, there's just less and less interest in these cases, and I wish I could do more to bring attention to them. So I will once again ask you to share Wendy's case and to share this case. Now, going into a little bit of a sassier mode, if you will, the next thing on my list was I have police worked the case as a potential robbery for the first year. And why? Why? I don't understand why this was worked as a potential robbery at all, given what we know, right? Whoever did this likely would have had time to at least glance at the bedrooms, I would assume. That they might come in, make sure nobody else is in the house besides Mae, and see that $100, lying out on the dresser. Why not take it? I don't know. I guess I get why they didn't take it, right? If robbery's not the motive, that's why they didn't take it, right? But why are they working this case as a potential robbery for a year? There were so many little things that were never answered by police. They kept a lot of things private in this case, which we see sometimes, but even 60 years later, they're not giving up the information, which is just, I don't know. It seems really strange to me. But let's go on to our media discrepancies because there were a lot. Their ages, one, Anne was reported as being 41, 42, and 44. But thank goodness the Middlesex County Crime Stoppers have a cold case page about the case. They say that she was 41 there, so that's what I went with. Also, Mae's age was reported as 11 and also 12, and in one publication they called her Mac. So again, I went to the Middlesex County Crime Stoppers page and relied on that information there. They also got Maurice's name wrong, sometimes reported as Matthew. I mean, just a lot of discrepancies in this case. Another was like the timeline. There was all sorts of scattered reporting about the timeline, which is why I really kept it to that 12:30 to like 2:30, 3 o'clock window, because they just some people said it was, 2:30 where Mae was killed. Some people said it was closer to 3, everything in between. So many discrepancies in this case, and I just really hope that I got everything right. But let's go on to our heroes of the episode. I love having multiple heroes. First is Elizabeth, New Jersey Police Captain Todd Mooney, the man who created the Facebook group. I think this is the first time in Voices for Justice history where a man, a person, I should say, makes a hero of the episode twice in a row. So Todd Mooney for creating the Facebook page. And it's not even like that it led to definitive answers, right? Because like I said, it's still very much up in the air if there's a definitive connection there between this like mob hit or whatever it could have been. But his efforts to do that were very commendable. I mean, for him to reach into another case and see, oh, there's, this witness who potentially hasn't been investigated to the best of our abilities and reach out and ask her to join the group. Todd Mooney, you're amazing. Thank you. And of course, our second hero of the episode is Alice's unnamed classmate who pushed to have her case looked at again. Getting emotional, you guys know that happens. If there was ever proof that one person can make a huge difference in a case, this is it. I think people see me as like extremely idealistic when I talk about how your one share, your involvement can really lead to results. And I think that this is like all the proof in the world that we need. He felt some type of way. He reached out to police. They reopened the case and they solved it. So Alice's unnamed classmate, you make our hero of the episode because you helped solve that case. You reached out decades later after I'm sure, unfortunately, so many people had forgotten, moved on, forgot details, whatever it might be. You were persistent and you got results. So thank you. It's just so amazing, you guys. See something, say something. If you know of an older case, you've been involved in it, reach out, push for those answers, push for these cases to be reopened. Sometimes it just takes like one detective who's, inquisitive, who's curious about it. You never know. The worst they can say is no. And obviously the best thing that can happen is the case gets solved. Which brings me right into our segment of hope. I am reading from CBS News. This is from Long Island, New York. The article is written by Jennifer McLogan, and the title reads, "After 52 years, brutal rape and murder on Long Island is finally solved, police say." So this is about the case of Barbara Waldman in 1974. She was a 31-year-old New York University graduate and was discovered on the second floor of her family's Oceanside home by her son Eric, who had just gotten off the kindergarten school bus. And we were just talking about secondary victims, so I want to read this extremely heartbreaking but important quote. He said, "I've had the image of my mom in my head since I'm 5, so it won't go away until I die." And this was a very violent crime. She was sexually assaulted, and then she was shot in the back of her head as she was tied up with the stocking she was wearing. We don't have a ton of details here, but it says that her family and the police never gave up. And more than 50 years later, science linked a man named Thomas Generazio. You guys know I don't care to pronounce their names correctly. Thomas Generazio, who is a local oceanside sanitation worker. And it's your classic DNA solves the case, right? They had sketches at the time from witnesses, but it was investigative genetic genealogy that solved it. That man did die of cancer in 2004, long before this was made a match, but this did bring a lot of answers to this family. Specifically, it looks like there was a lot of suspicion around Barbara's husband, Gerald, who was a local dentist. And Jerry says that was vindication for his father, who he says went to his deathbed not knowing who or why. And I want to read you another hard quote for me to read, but it's so important, from her daughter, Marla, who says, quote, "It's not about seeking legal punishment. It is an emotional, psychological resolution," end quote. I think a lot of families in true crime are in that same boat. They may not be able to get any type of legal repercussions or punishment, but the resolution does provide a certain level of justice and peace. But, as always, thank you, I love you, and I'll talk to you next time.